People like you don't sit here." The words sliced through the ballroom like broken glass. Every laugh, every note from the string quartet, died mid-air. The woman who said it, Clara Whitmore, heir to a banking empire, didn't whisper. She wanted the room to hear. Her manicured hand pointed toward the black woman in the red gown, seated quietly among billionaires. "You belong in the audience, not at the donors' table." The crowd rippled with the kind of silence that hides behind forced smiles. Forks lowered. Someone's phone camera blinked red. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we are glad you are here. Now, back to Amara Lewis. Amara didn't move. She didn't raise her voice or shift in her seat. She just looked up one calm glance that cut through every inch of the golden ballroom. The light above her didn't flatter, it obeyed. Her voice was even, measured. "I didn't come to sit where I'm told. I came to sit where I paid." That single sentence made 3 heads turn. A man in a navy tuxedo choked on his champagne. Clara blinked, then laughed. "You paid? For this table?" She turned to the guests beside her, grinning like she was in on a private joke. "Well, sweetheart, maybe the seating chart got confused. This table's for contributors, not guests of honor." Laughter followed, soft and poisonous. Amara's gaze swept the room, the crystal chandeliers, the polished silver, the stares that measured her presence instead of her worth. "Interesting," she murmured. "How generosity always sounds like ownership in rooms like this." Clara leaned in, lowering her voice, but not her arrogance. "Do you even know where you are? This is the Whitmore Foundation. My family built this." Amara looked directly at her. "And my company funds it." The words landed with the quiet power of a gavel. Cameras flashed. A few donors exchanged uneasy looks. Someone at the back whispered, "Wait, what did she just say?" Clara smiled tightly, masking the flicker of fear behind her eyes. "You must be mistaken," she said, the edges of her tone trembling. "We don't partner with small firms." "Then maybe you should read your balance sheets," Amara replied, calm as marble. "You'll find my name above yours." The tension snapped. Every whisper became a wave. The room that had treated her like background suddenly remembered her face. A reporter angled his lens closer. The strings stopped playing. Clara's champagne glass quivered in her hand. Amara stood slowly, her red dress catching the light like flame under glass. "The question isn't whether I belong here," she said, voice steady, unwavering. "It's whether you still do." And for the first time all night, the heiress who owned the room felt small inside it. The gala resumed, but the silence did not recover. Music floated awkwardly back into the air, pretending nothing had happened. Yet every eye in the room followed Amara Lewis. She did not chase attention. It clung to her anyway. The woman in the red dress sat with the patience of someone who had been underestimated her entire life. Across the table, Clara Whitmore poured herself more champagne. The crystal rang against the bottle like a nervous laugh. "You have quite the imagination," she said, still trying to sound amused. "Equinox Capital? I have never heard of it." Amara smiled faintly. "That is how power works. You rarely hear it coming." A few guests chuckled, unsure whose side they were on. The man beside Clara, a venture capitalist with a reputation for arrogance, leaned closer and whispered loud enough for others to hear, "Some people climb ladders that were never built for them." Amara turned her head slowly toward him. "Then build your own," she replied. The table went still again. At another table, a journalist named Maya Torres adjusted her camera lens, whispering to her colleague, "This woman is not ordinary." The red recording light blinked as she focused on Amara's face, calm under the ballroom's cruel light. Clara shifted uncomfortably. "You should know your place," she said. "This event is for legacy families. Old money, old names." Amara's expression did not change. "And yet you are using my company's technology to process tonight's donations," she said evenly. "Legacy can be rented. Innovation must be earned." Someone at the back laughed under their breath. A ripple of tension passed through the crowd. The orchestra faltered again, strings trembling like nerves. For a brief moment, Clara looked to her father across the room, Richard Whitmore, the patriarch whose empire sat behind every check written here. He caught her eye and frowned. It was not concern for her reputation. It was fear that she had just insulted someone who could touch their money. Amara saw it. She had seen that look before from boardrooms, from bankers, from men who believed that quiet meant powerless. Her voice softened, almost kind. I do not blame you, Clara. You learned early that arrogance feels safer than truth. Clara's cheeks flushed. Are you lecturing me at my own event? No, Amara said. I am reminding you where your name is printed under mine. A hush spread again, deep and heavy. Cameras clicked. The chandeliers seemed to dim as if the room itself was listening. At that exact moment, across the city, Amara's assistant received a silent text. Clause 9. Confirm authorization. Inside the gala, no one noticed the quiet buzz of change already in motion. Amara did not need to raise her glass or her voice. She had already raised the stakes. The music faltered again, and this time it did not recover. The gala lights shimmered against the glass walls, reflecting 100 uneasy faces. Conversations shrank into murmurs. Clara Whitmore's smile thinned until it trembled on her lips. She leaned back in her chair and whispered sharply, You think this is impressive? Money moves faster than pride. By tomorrow morning, our family will pull every cent from your fund. Amara folded her napkin carefully, each motion deliberate, elegant, unbothered. Then tomorrow morning will be a historic one, she said softly. A man across the table tried to lighten the air with a nervous laugh. Come on, Clara. It is just a charity dinner. But Clara was beyond civility now. Her voice carried, sharp and cold. No, this is a warning. People like her walk in, take the spotlight for an evening, and vanish when the cameras turn off. A few heads nodded. A few looked down in shame. Amara's tone stayed level. People like me built what you spend. The words cut clean through the noise. One reporter gasped audibly. Another raised her phone, recording discreetly. The orchestra stopped playing. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Clara's father, Richard Whitmore, began walking toward their table, his smile fixed but his eyes hard. Every step echoed like a drumbeat of control. What seems to be the issue here? He asked, though he already knew. Amara stood, finally meeting him eye to eye. No issue, she said. Just a difference in definition. You call it charity, I call it equity. Richard gave a tight smile. We appreciate your passion, Dr. Lewis, but perhaps you have misunderstood the hierarchy in this room. Amara nodded once. Oh, I understand it perfectly, I just stopped recognizing it. He hesitated, unsettled by her calm. For the first time, the patriarch of Whitmore Financial looked uncertain. From the corner, the journalist whispered into her microphone, This is turning historic. The most powerful black CEO in social finance, standing against the Whitmore dynasty in their own ballroom. The guests began to shift in their seats. No one wanted to move first. The power in the room had changed direction. Clara tried to reclaim the moment. You do not scare us, she said, voice raised now, sharp with humiliation. You are a name on a paper, a temporary partner, replaceable. Amara's gaze was steady. Then replace me, if you can. The line dropped like a gavel. Every guest felt it. Richard exhaled slowly, hiding anger behind a businessman's grin. Security, please escort Dr. Lewis to the lobby. But no one moved. The guards near the door stood still, earpieces buzzing faintly. A voice came through their line, low and urgent. Stand down. Do not approach. Amara looked at Richard, almost pitying. It seems they received the memo before you did. And for the first time in 30 years of running empires, Richard Whitmore had no reply. The weight of silence belonged entirely to her. The ballroom felt smaller now, the air too heavy for its chandeliers to sparkle. Guests fidgeted with their napkins, pretending to sip champagne that had lost its fizz. Amara Lewis stood steady, her red gown unmoving in the swirl of unease. The guards near the door still had not approached. The order to stand down lingered in the air like static. Richard Whitmore forced another smile, the kind that hides panic behind porcelain teeth. Let us not make a scene, he said. Dr. Lewis, we appreciate your contributions, but perhaps it is best to continue this discussion privately. Amara's voice was calm but unyielding. You made it public when your daughter called me charity in front of 300 people. Clara crossed her arms, defensive but trembling. You twisted my words. No, Amara replied, her gaze direct, voice slow. You revealed them. A hush spread again. The journalist's camera light glowed red from across the room, recording every syllable. Amara turned slightly, her eyes scanning the audience. Each of you came here tonight to feel generous, to prove you could fix what your wealth helped fracture. I am not here for that applause. Someone at the far table whispered, "She is right." Clara's face hardened. "You are accusing this foundation of hypocrisy?" "I am describing it," Amara said evenly. "You raise money for equality, then humiliate the woman funding it." The room shifted. The applause that usually greeted the Whitmores had turned into the sound of forks on porcelain and nervous coughs. Richard cleared his throat, stepping closer to regain control. "You are out of line, Dr. Lewis." Amara's tone did not rise. The line moved. "You just did not notice." She reached for her clutch, removed her phone, and tapped once. Across the city, a server room flickered to life. At Equinox headquarters, a silent notification appeared on a glass screen. Clause 9 activated. Confirmation pending. Clara tried to sound amused. "What, calling your driver?" Amara met her gaze, calm and steady. "Calling my balance sheet." A few guests gasped quietly. Richard's eyes narrowed. "What have you done?" Amara placed the phone face down on the table. "Nothing you can reverse." For the first time, the Whitmores looked unsure whose event this was. Cameras clicked faster. The journalists edged forward. Amara continued softly, almost like a confession. "I have spent 20 years being invited into rooms like this. Rooms that wanted my donations, not my decisions. But tonight is not about your invitation. It is about my ownership." She turned toward the crowd. "And ownership does not beg to belong." The room broke into uneasy murmurs, a tremor of awe mixed with disbelief. Clara's glass shattered against the table as her hand shook. The sound echoed louder than music. Amara did not flinch. She looked at the shards glittering like fallen crowns and said quietly, "Careful. Power cuts deeper when it breaks." The broken glass scattered across the white linen like fragments of a reputation. Every eye in the ballroom followed the reflection. Clara Whitmore's hand trembled, her confidence leaking through the cracks of her diamond composure. Amara Lewis remained motionless, her calm so sharp it felt dangerous. Richard Whitmore raised a hand to the musicians, signaling them to play, but no one lifted an instrument. The silence was complete, clean, and cutting. "Enough," he said, his voice struggling for authority. "We will not turn a charity gala into a spectacle." Amara turned to him slowly. "A spectacle is when power pretends to be generosity," she said. "What you are seeing now is accountability." The journalist's camera zoomed closer. Around the room, phones lifted discreetly, recording history in real time. The Whitmore's public image, crafted over decades, was slipping through their manicured fingers. Clara found her voice again, brittle but loud. "You think humiliating us makes you equal? It only proves why people like you never stay in our circles." Amara's expression did not change. "Circles are meant to include, not trap. You confuse legacy with ownership." The crowd murmured again, unsure whether to defend the hosts or the truth echoing in Amara's tone. From the back of the ballroom, a young woman in a black staff uniform stepped forward nervously. Her name tag read Lena. Her hands shook, but her voice carried. "Dr. Lewis is telling the truth," she said. "Her company processed every major Whitmore transaction this quarter. I saw the files." Clara spun toward her. "You do not speak here." Lena swallowed hard but stood her ground. "Someone should." Gasps rippled through the guests. The shift had begun, one voice breaking rank, then another. A waiter nodded quietly. A board member lowered his head. Amara did not move, but her presence filled every inch of the ballroom. "The silence always cracks first," she said softly. "It is how truth gets in." Richard's tone turned cold. "You have made your point. Leave before you regret it." Amara's reply was quiet but final. "I stopped regretting politeness the day your firm tried to erase mine from the acquisition reports." The older man froze. That was not public knowledge. A murmur of disbelief rolled through the tables. A journalist whispered, "She has receipts." Amara picked up her phone, turned it face up, and tapped once. A faint chime echoed through the room. Across the large projector behind the stage, the charity's financial dashboard appeared live, authentic, undeniable. At the bottom of the screen glowed a new line. "Whitmore Holdings. Transfer initiated. $3 billion withdrawn." Clara gasped, color draining from her face. Richard stared at the display as if it were a sentence. Amara said quietly, "You called me charity. I call this closure." The room erupted, half in shock, half in awe. The woman in the red gown had not raised her voice once, yet every empire in the room had just heard her roar. The screen behind the stage glowed like judgment itself. The bold numbers, $3 billion, burned across the ballroom in cold, digital light. No one moved. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim under the weight of it. Clara Whitmore stared at the display as if denial could rewrite it. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Richard Whitmore finally spoke, voice thin and unfamiliar. "You had no right to access our accounts." Amara Lewis turned her gaze toward him, calm as marble. "Correction. I had authorization. I signed it when your lawyers begged for my capital 3 years ago." A collective murmur swelled from the guests. Some whispered her name as if repeating it might help them understand how a woman they had ignored 5 minutes ago now controlled the air they breathed. Richard's composure cracked. "You think this makes you powerful?" he said. "You will be destroyed in the press. Do you have any idea who you are dealing with?" Amara's voice was steady, every syllable deliberate. "Yes, I am dealing with the people who called me diversity funding instead of a partner. The same ones who used my face in brochures and deleted my name from the contracts." The journalist near the corner lowered her camera just enough to whisper, "She is ending them on record." Then she hit stream again. Clara stepped forward, desperation replacing arrogance. "This is theft," she shouted. "You cannot just take money from a foundation. It belongs to the public." Amara's gaze did not waver. "Then the public will finally see where their donations were hidden. Check the offshore ledgers, Clara. Transparency is not theft." The crowd gasped again. Guests shifted in their chairs, torn between curiosity and fear. The illusion of the Whitmores' untouchable empire had started to crack. Amara took one quiet step closer to the center of the room. The soft rustle of her gown was the only sound. "Every dollar you claimed as charity was a transaction of control," she said. "But tonight, the balance changes hands." Richard's face drained of color. "You will regret this." Amara's voice lowered to a near whisper, but it carried across the hall. "Regret is for those who wait for permission. I am long past that." Behind her, the projection shifted again. A live update confirmed the transfer verified, sealed, irreversible. $3 billion reallocated from Whitmore Holdings to Equinox Foundation for Social Equity. Phones buzzed around the room, screens lit up with breaking news alerts. Major corporate power shift at Whitmore Gala. Clara stumbled back into her chair, eyes wet, hands shaking. For the first time in her life, no amount of wealth could buy control. Amara looked at her without anger, only truth. "You mistook silence for weakness," she said softly. "That is the most expensive mistake you have ever made." The ballroom stayed frozen, caught between awe and reckoning. The woman they had dismissed had just rewritten power, live, undeniable, permanent. Phones buzzed like a swarm of hornets as notifications exploded across the ballroom. Guests stared at their screens, reading headlines that spread faster than any rumor could. Equinox Capital reclaims $3 billion from Whitmore Holdings. Charity Gala turns into corporate reckoning. The story had already escaped the room. Clara Whitmore's composure shattered. Her chair screeched backward as she stood. "You cannot humiliate my family in public and walk away," she cried. The tremor in her voice betrayed her fear more than her fury. "We will sue you for everything you have." Amara Lewis faced her, unblinking. "You cannot sue for what you signed away." Lena, the young staff member who had spoken earlier, flinched at the sound of Clara's voice but did not move. She watched as Amara turned slightly toward her. "Thank you," Amara said softly, a sentence that landed like a promise. Lena nodded, eyes wide, realizing she had just witnessed history. Richard Whitmore's voice boomed again, searching for control. "This is sabotage. You have destroyed an entire network of trust and goodwill," Amara replied, calm and deliberate. "You built it on exploitation, not goodwill. Tonight, you are just seeing the invoice." Murmurs rose into open conversation now. Some guests whispered their support. Others backed away, not wanting to be associated with either side. The orchestra members stood silently by the stage, their instruments hanging at their sides like props in a play that had ended too suddenly. Clara's hands trembled. "You think people will still invest in you after this? You will be finished by morning." Amara tilted her head slightly, a quiet smile forming. "You said the same thing 7 years ago when I was denied my first loan. By morning, I built my own bank." The words drew a gasp from the crowd. It was not arrogance, it was memory, sharpened into truth. A journalist raised her voice, breaking the heavy air. Dr. Lewis, is this an act of revenge? Amara looked into the camera's lens, her expression unreadable. It is not revenge. It is correction. The sentence spread through the room like a pulse. The crowd stilled again, waiting for what would come next. Richard tried one last time. You think you can survive this war? Amara stepped forward, her heels silent against the marble. I did not start a war. I ended a monopoly. Behind her, the projection updated once more. A new alert flashed. Equinox Foundation recognized as controlling stakeholder of Whitmore Financial. Gasps rippled through the audience. Even the security team exchanged glances, unsure who they now worked for. Amara looked around the ballroom, her tone level, her presence unshakable. You all came here expecting a charity performance. What you got instead was an audit. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle into the silence. Do not confuse grace for weakness. Grace is simply power choosing not to shout. And in that moment, even the lights seemed to bow. The ballroom had become a courtroom without walls. No one dared to move, and yet every camera kept rolling. The faces of the Whitmores, once symbols of unshakable legacy, now looked pale under the glare of truth. The weight of their empire hung in the air like perfume gone sour. Amara Lewis stood in the center, surrounded by witnesses, her calm presence commanding the kind of silence that once belonged only to the powerful. You built this gala to celebrate generosity, she said, her tone even and quiet. But generosity that demands obedience is not giving. It is control wrapped in a bow. Oh. Across the table, Clara Whitmore gripped the edge of the linen, knuckles white. You have no idea what you have unleashed, she hissed. Amara looked at her without malice. On the contrary, she said, I have unleashed what you buried accountability. Phones flashed. Guests whispered. Some recorded with trembling hands. Others stared, caught between disbelief and awe. From the back of the room, a man in a gray suit raised his voice. Is this true, Dr. Lewis? Do you really own controlling shares of Whitmore Financial? Amara met his gaze. Ownership is not the same as control, she said. Control belongs to whoever has the courage to use it. Her phone buzzed once on the table. She picked it up, reading the silent confirmation. The transfer was complete. The servers had updated. The legal documentation had been verified across 3 networks. The shift of power was no longer a threat, it was a fact. Clara's voice cracked. You are destroying us. Amara's eyes softened, almost pitying. No, Clara, you destroyed yourselves the moment you mistook privilege for permanence. The journalist, still streaming live, whispered into her mic, this is unreal. The woman they mocked at the start of the night just dismantled an empire without raising her voice. Richard Whitmore's breath came unevenly. His pride was collapsing faster than his empire. You think the public will stand with you? He said. You just humiliated every person in this room. Amara turned toward him fully now. No, Richard. I reminded them that silence is complicity, and some of them are tired of staying silent. As if on cue, Lena stepped forward again. Her voice wavered but held steady. Dr. Lewis, the staff stands with you. A ripple of support broke through the crowd, soft claps, nods, murmurs of agreement. The illusion of Whitmore control dissolved like mist. Amara glanced toward the stage, her reflection mirrored in the ballroom's glass walls. Empires fall quietly, she said. First in numbers, then in belief. She took a slow breath, her posture tall and still. By tomorrow morning, this building will belong to Equinox Foundation. Not because I stole it, but because I earned it. Then, looking straight into the camera lens, she finished, This is what justice looks like when it wears patience instead of anger. The applause did not come all at once. It started softly, hesitantly, then grew into something undeniable, a sound that felt less like celebration and more like awakening. The applause swelled and then fractured into pockets of disbelief. Some guests clapped out of courage, others out of guilt. The rest simply froze, too stunned to decide which side of history they were standing on. Amara Lewis remained still, her eyes following the slow unraveling of the old order that had once defined every inch of this room. Clara Whitmore looked around, her confidence replaced by panic. Stop filming, she shouted, waving at the guests with phones in their hands. You cannot record this. It is private property. Lena, standing near the staff entrance, answered softly but firmly. It was your property, not anymore. The crowd reacted a few gasps, a few quiet laughs that cut sharper than insults. The hierarchy of the evening had shifted permanently. Richard Whitmore's voice cracked like glass. "You have ruined a legacy built over a century." Amara turned toward him, the red fabric of her gown moving like a slow flame. "A legacy built on exclusion does not deserve to last a century," she said. "I did not ruin it, Richard. I revealed it." Her phone vibrated again. She glanced down, reading a new alert. Transfer confirmed. Equinox Foundation officially holds controlling interest in Whitmore Global Properties. She locked the screen and set the phone aside, her expression unchanged. The journalist's voice carried across the room, trembling with the gravity of it all. "Dr. Lewis, how does it feel to take back what was yours?" Amara paused before answering, letting the silence settle like dust. "It feels like breathing in a room that tried to suffocate you," she said, "and realizing the air was always yours." The guests whispered, some wiping away tears, others pretending not to feel the weight of her words. Clara tried one last defense. "You think people will celebrate this? They will call you ruthless." Amara met her gaze. "They already did. The difference is now I am not asking for their approval." Richard slumped into his chair, his authority dissolving under the quiet rhythm of truth. The empire that once dominated financial headlines was now just a headline itself. From the back, a man in an expensive suit raised his glass slightly toward Amara. "To courage," he said, breaking the tension. A few others followed, hesitant but sincere. The sound of crystal meeting crystal echoed like confession. Amara smiled faintly, her voice calm again. "Courage is easy when the cost is applause. It is harder when the cost is power." Clara's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "You planned this," she whispered. "Every word, every step." Amara nodded once. "Not planned, prepared. There is a difference." The projection behind them dimmed slowly, leaving the ballroom bathed in warm light and reckoning. The red of her dress seemed to pulse against the gold decor, like a heartbeat the room could not ignore. She took one slow breath and looked around the hall that had tried to belittle her. "You called it charity," she said softly. "But tonight, it was justice dressed in evening wear." And as the crowd absorbed her words, the applause began again, steady, rising, unstoppable. It was not for money, nor for power, but for the quiet revolution that had just happened in front of their eyes. The applause rolled through the ballroom like thunder wrapped in velvet. It was not polite or rehearsed, it was raw, uncoordinated, and real. For the first time that night, the sound did not belong to the Whitmores. It belonged to Amara Lewis. She stood at the center of the room as if she were carved from composure itself. The crowd's reaction did not swell her pride. It steadied her purpose. Cameras flashed, catching the image that would become tomorrow's front page, the black CEO in a red gown, standing calm in a storm of revelation. Richard Whitmore rose unsteadily from his chair. The lines on his face seemed deeper now, carved by shock and decades of arrogance. "You will not win in the long run," he said. "Money moves in circles. It always returns to its rightful owners." Amara turned to him, her gaze unwavering. "Then you should ask yourself why it stopped circling around you." The sentence landed heavier than any gavel. Around the room, people exchanged glances, some full of admiration, others of quiet dread. The orchestra, still frozen, began to pack their instruments in stunned silence. Clara's voice broke through the murmurs. "You humiliated my family. My grandfather built this empire from nothing." Amara's tone softened, but it did not bend. "Your grandfather built it on the backs of people who were told they did not belong. I just made sure the bill finally came due." Lena stepped forward again, her voice small but steady. "Dr. Lewis, people are watching this all over the world." "Oh." Amara looked toward the nearest camera, her expression serene. "Good," she said. "Let them see what respect looks like when it stops asking for permission." The journalist, still holding her microphone, whispered to her audience, "What we are witnessing is history. A woman who was underestimated, dismissed, and mocked is rewriting power in real time." Richard clenched his fists, his control slipping through the spaces between his fingers. "This will ruin everything you have worked for," he said. "You think justice can survive in business? The system will turn against you." Amara gave a small smile. "It already did. I just learned how to own the system that rejected me." Her words drew another wave of murmurs and quiet applause. Some guests stood, nodding with respect. Others walked out silently, too proud to face what they had just seen. Amara turned to the staff, her tone warm now. You have all been underpaid and overworked long enough. Tomorrow morning, Equinox Foundation will assume management of this venue. Your contracts, your benefits, your dignity, they are secure. A murmur of gratitude moved through the employees. Some smiled through tears. Clara sank back into her chair, defeated. You ruined our name, she whispered. Amara looked down at her gently. No, Clara, I reminded the world what it was worth. As the room settled into silence again, Amara lifted her glass. The reflection of the chandelier shimmered in the champagne like liquid gold. To correction, she said quietly. And to every person who was told they did not belong until they owned the table. No one dared to respond. The toast belonged entirely to her. The sound of crystal glasses meeting was hesitant at first, then faded into silence once more. Amara Lewis remained standing, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. The applause had ended, but its echo still lived in the eyes watching her. She did not gloat. She simply existed in the truth she had created. Behind her, the projection shifted again, displaying a final verification. Whitmore Holdings, transfer complete. Equinox Foundation, now primary owner. There it was, undeniable, irreversible, permanent. The very empire that once excluded her now bore her signature. Richard Whitmore's voice came out like gravel dragged across marble. You may have taken the company, but you will never have the respect that comes with our name. Amara turned slowly toward him, her voice calm and razor-sharp. Respect is not inherited, Richard. It is earned in rooms where people like you never looked. The audience stirred again, the truth too clear to deny. Clara sat motionless, her mascara streaked, her posture defeated. She looked smaller than she ever had, fragile beneath the chandeliers that once glittered for her family. Amara stepped closer to her, the red fabric of her gown whispering against the marble. I did not want to destroy you, Clara. I wanted to expose the illusion that your world was built on. Clara lifted her eyes, voice trembling. You have no idea what it takes to survive in this business. Amara's gaze softened, not with sympathy but understanding. I know exactly what it takes. I survived it without a family name to protect me. Lena, standing near the doorway, wiped a tear discreetly. For the first time, she was witnessing justice that did not need shouting. It stood quietly, undeniable. The journalist spoke again, her tone reverent. Dr. Lewis, what happens next? Amara exhaled, a breath that felt like the end of a long war. Tomorrow morning, every Whitmore property will reopen under Equinox management. The donations will still reach the people who need them, but this time, without conditions. Her words carried across the ballroom like a vow. No more charity with strings, no more power disguised as kindness. If wealth cannot uplift, it does not deserve to exist. The crowd reacted a low murmur of agreement, then applause again, this time slower, heavier, filled with meaning. Richard tried to stand but sank back down. His empire was gone. His daughter's arrogance was broken. And the woman he had once dismissed as a token of diversity now owned his legacy. Amara turned to the staff, to Lena, to the guests whose silence had become complicity. When you see injustice, she said, your choice is not whether you notice it. Your choice is whether you speak before or after it wins. She looked back once more at the screen behind her, now displaying her company's emblem, an eclipse of gold and black. Justice, she said softly, is not vengeance. It is balance restored. The room stood in reverent stillness, the kind that only comes when something greater than victory has taken place. It was the sound of power rediscovered, wrapped in grace. The gala had fallen completely silent. The chandeliers glowed softly, no longer symbols of privilege but witnesses to change. Amara Lewis stood at the center of it all, the hum of quiet cameras surrounding her like a heartbeat. The empire of the Whitmores was over, but the moment was larger than that. It was the undoing of an old world and the beginning of a new one. Clara Whitmore sat motionless, her hands clasped in her lap, her expression a blur of disbelief and shame. For the first time, she looked not like an heiress, but like a woman finally facing the mirror of her own words. Richard Whitmore stared at the floor, the weight of legacy pressing on his shoulders. His power had never left the room before tonight. Amara's voice broke the stillness, steady, low, deliberate. Power is not who speaks the loudest, she said. It is who still stands when the noise is gone. She turned slightly, her gaze sweeping across the guests. For years, I sat at tables where my ideas were praised but my presence was questioned, where they smiled at my success but whispered about my skin, where they called it progress to invite me and charity to listen. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some bowed their heads. Others stared, unable to look away. Amara continued, her tone softening without losing its edge. Tonight, I did not fight for revenge. I fought to remind the world that belonging is not a gift to be granted. It is a right that cannot be taken away. She paused. The quiet stretched like a held breath. And I am not the only one who has been told, you do not belong. To everyone who has ever heard those words, remember this night. You are not guests in someone else's story. You are the author of your own. The journalist lowered her camera slightly, tears welling as she whispered, that line alone will outlive this gala. Amara smiled faintly. Then let it. Let this be more than a scandal. Let it be a signal. She reached for her glass once more and raised it, the gold liquid catching the light like dawn breaking through the dark. To dignity, to ownership, to every person who was told to wait for permission. The applause came again, not as chaos but as rhythm measured, united, rising from every corner of the ballroom. Staff members clapped beside guests. Reporters joined in. Even the orchestra bowed their heads before playing the first soft notes of a new melody. Amara turned toward the exit, her steps unhurried, each one deliberate, as if claiming the ground itself. The red gown trailed behind her like a flame leaving its mark. At the doorway, she stopped and looked back one final time. I do not need to record what happened tonight, she said quietly, because I am the result of every moment like it. And with that, she walked into the night. No guards, no entourage, only the sound of justice finally exhaling after too long in silence.